Hi, I'm Tom at Sweet Maria's Coffee, and we're going to talk about cacao today. And why does Sweet Maria have cacao? We do coffee. Well, just for a limited time, we're doing sets where we're pairing coffee and cacao and offering you raw cacao. Cocoa before it's roasted is called cacao. And along with coffee in different themes. Our first one is sort of coffees that exhibit a lot of chocolate flavors of different kinds, along with 2 pounds of actual cacao. And you can choose right now from Ecuador Cacao Organic and Uganda Semuliki Forest Organic Cacao. We're not going to be selling cacao a long time. This isn't what we do. It's not our wheelhouse. We're not experts in cacao. But we have some recommendations in case you get really interested in this of where to go, and I'll talk about that later. But there's a lot of key differences between cacao and coffee and roasting. So I want to go over that. But the main thing is that whenever I travel in coffee, I run across the trees, cacao, and I see it in the local markets, and I'm always really curious and interested. So I started picking up, anything I could buy, and in a lot of cases, it's not exactly the best cacao. In fact, in Indonesia, the local cacao isn't even fermented. It's kind of considered a lower grade, kind of industrial cacao for huge cocoa chocolate makers. So what we're selling is really super high grade fermented cacao, which is considered like more complex and more interesting in the cup, sort of like specialty coffee versus commercial coffee in a way. But I wanted to show you some cacao, and what I'm going to do is actually run through a roast in my sort of toaster oven. Now, this is kind of weird because this isn't actually the best way, we think, to roast cacao, but it works, and most people have one or a regular oven. Actually, the best way, if you Google how to roast cacao, is the Be More coffee roaster. So a lot of you already have one of those, and that's actually a really good roaster for cacao. But we're going to go over this sort of second option because most people have it, and I'm going to tell you some roasters not to use with cacao as well. So the first thing, I'm going to just sort of talk while I get this started and we can watch it. Again, this isn't really the best technique I'm going to use. I'm using a perforated screen here, and I'm going to get this in. And I've heated up my oven at 400. This is my home repair because the spring broke. This is a Cosori toaster. It's called an air fryer. It's just a toaster oven with more convection. And I'm going to turn that on to the high setting. I've preheated it at 400. I'm going to now go down to, let's go to 350. And I'm also going to just use the timer. On this, I'm just going to do 18 minutes, which is a little bit shorter than we actually recommend in the Be More. And I start at a high temperature, and I'm going to bring it down to 350, and I'm going to kind of see what happens. The other reasons this isn't ideal, there's several reasons that a toaster oven is not as good as a Be More. First of all, it's static, but we thought this is a great way that you can actually see the process. It's not moving around, and it's not inside a drum, so you can see it happen. And we'll probably be able to hear it because it's quiet. But you don't have that agitation that's really great. And cacao's really different from coffee. You want to bake cacao over a longer period of time. You're not roasting at a high temperature. So as a matter of fact, the Be More has a setting which I find fairly useless for coffee. It's P5. It's the coolest automatic setting on a Be More. And you can extend the roast. So the roast we're finding best is to take a pound of cacao, use the 1 pound setting on the Be More, P5, and extend it to do 23 minutes. We've done anything from 18 to 23 minutes. So it's actually the lowest temperature roast setting on a Be More. Not good for coffee, B-more, you're always trying to push to get it to roast faster because it tends to be a slow roaster. That just happens to be really good for cacao. So this isn't as good because it's not agitating. And also, what I would be doing if I was roasting really to my best ability in an oven, in a toaster oven, is especially once this starts warming up and the roast is kind of underway, I would actually be opening this and shaking it around and stirring it. And I'm not going to do that so much on this. And I also haven't really filled the tray. And this particular tray is cool because it allows the heat all around it with the airflow in this thing, but it doesn't allow me to actually really shake it. I'd have to get a spoon or something and stir it, which is not ideal. I think generally if you're used to roasting coffee, you're going to find cacao fairly forgiving. It's not as critical. You know, if you roast coffee and you wait 15, 20, 30 seconds later after you've heard your first crack rolling, you really get a different cup. Cacao isn't that critical. So, you know, you can have 1-2 minutes. It doesn't matter so much. The main things to keep in mind when you approach cacao after roasting coffee is go for lighter, not darker. So you think, oh, I want strong chocolate flavors. And in fact, what you get is real acrid chocolate flavors if you go too long and too dark. So err on the side of lightness. The intensity that you taste in like bean to bar, cocoa, chocolate bars is from percentage of an intensity of chocolate and the way they also blend different origins together. They don't just like roast really dark to get intense dark chocolate. What you get is this really acrid burnt flavor. And we had one roast we did that was like almost like skunky flavor. A lot of people said like garlic and coming up with these really bad burnt analogies. So try to avoid that. So the other thing here is we're now at 7.5 minutes and I'm starting to hear a few pops. So like coffee, cacao tends to make some sounds as the moisture is liberated from it and it cracks physically. I think the thing with that is it's harder to read and it doesn't happen in a time frame. It doesn't really give you a clue about how done the roast is. So that's great, and you can hear that. It is a good sign that we're in the roast process, that it's happening, but it doesn't mean we're done. And so, you know, as I said, err on the side of lighter, and you know, you can kind of take out some beans and test it along the way. It's really no problem. But with the toaster, you are losing heat when you remove it. So let's just go ahead and see what's happening with this one. Oops, and I happen to take a sort of a defect bean. Now we do see cacao's a little rougher than cocoa or than coffee in some ways, and you do see some small pieces, variations in bean sizes, but this is really top grade cacao. This comes from Uncommon Cacao, who's a importer of basically more or less sustainable cacao and high-end cacao for a lot of really famous chocolate makers. Let's take a look at these though. Here's another issue that you're going to have if you are used to roasting coffee and are going to make some tries at having some fun with cacao. Is this is raw and this is roasted. Even when I pick them up, I've got to sort of try to break the beans to see which one is fragile and fractures, because you just really can't tell visually on a glance. I can't which one is which. So it's not that obvious with color change. So I've already told you the audio cues with roasting cacao are a little hard to read. They don't quite mean what they do in coffee. And as you can see, the color isn't quite easy to read. So how do you roast this stuff? Like, how do you know if it's done? And the key is smell. The smell, and it's a great thing too, because the smell roasting cacao is outstanding. It just smells like somebody is making amazing fresh cookies or brownies in your house. And so like right now here in this room, it smells good. As you'll see, you know, to judge the doneness, a lot of it, you know, it's going to just take experience. This one I've sort of slightly peeled. And and you can sort of winnow them just with your fingers and a little friction. But what you'll find is cacao tends to fall apart, fractures. And that's why people sell cocoa nibs. Nibs are these sort of like, as you can see, essentially that's what people sell as nibs. And we'll talk a little bit about what do you do with the cacao you just roasted. Now with coffee, it's pretty obvious. You roast coffee, you're going to brew coffee. You're going to grind it and brew it. You know what to do with it. Cacao, it's like making chocolate is a whole nother thing. And in fact, we're not really even going there. I've never done it. It takes many different steps if you're really into that. We refer you to the online expert, the people I order cacao from, which is Chocolate Alchemy. And I'll mention them again, chocolatealchemy.com. I'm going to pay a little attention over here, see how we're doing. I'm telling you, this smells amazing. And it's pretty hot. Let's go ahead and take a look. And I think the best way to check it out is, it's hot. Just getting quite done, and we're only at 12 minutes, 12 and a half minutes. So we're going a little fast here. So first of all, what do you do with cacao? It's not like coffee. Well, first thing I love to do is eat it. It's super addictive. When it's really fresh, it's amazing, the flavor. If you really, really like bitter chocolate, you'll love cacao. And I do tend to peel it before eating it. However, the second favorite thing to do with it is to make cocoa tea. Cocoa tea is straining it, kind of like you would make herbal tea, but we have some specific recommendations on how to make cocoa tea and get a lot of intensity out of it. And it's delicious. It's very intense. And it's a little different than like hot chocolate. When you get hot chocolate in a powder, you're essentially getting like instant coffee with milk in it that dissolves completely. So cocoa tea, you're going to pulverize this, grind it. Don't use your burr grinder though. We'll talk about that. And you're going to strain it through some medium. You could use a French press, but our favorite way actually is to use a saucepan. And you boil your water, you add the cacao, and you bring it down to a simmer for 5 minutes. And then you use something like a strainer. We use this metal screen. Cacao tends to clog up paper filters. Or we then pour it into a French press. And you can, you're kind of doing the second tier of filtering here, because what you can do is you can pour the cacao through here, and a lot of it will remain in your saucepan. And then you can catch the remainder here in your French press. So that works really well. And you can add cream, you can add sugar at that point if you want to, but it's amazing. Just if you really like bitter chocolate, it's amazing as it is. I'm going to check in here because I think I'm really done. And it's been a little bit fast. I continued to hear pops all the way up. I just heard one, and it started about, was that 7.5 minutes or 8 minutes? So you're hearing that for a long period of time. But like I said, I'm worried about this getting a little too dark. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. And this feels a little bit soft, but that looks good, and that's perfect. That's really good. So, you get those classic flavors roasting a little darker, more bittering, but right here it's going to be much more complex. It's going to have a lot more brightness and a lot more flavor. So let's just end it there. And I'm going to take it out and cool it. So here's my cacao. I would normally take it and put it on a fan to cool it, but this looks really good. It smells incredible. It smells so good. I mentioned a couple things that you do with this. There's a lot of other things, I'm sure, if you search online. You can find them. We've had somebody here, Maria, made mole with it. And there's other kinds of drinks with spice that you make, like kind of a Mexican hot chocolate. So I did skip over how you grind it. I want to talk about that quickly. The one thing that you might have is a blade grinder. This works pretty good. It doesn't do a lot at a time. And the main issue is like it does with coffee, especially with cacao, it tends to cake a lot under the blade and get too fine under the blade there. So this works if you have it. Our favorite, but it's a lot of work, is mortar and pestle. It works really well, and you can start with just breaking the cacao. In fact, let me just throw a couple in here. So you would start with just breaking them into some pieces, and then you would work it down into the size you want, which is coarser than coffee. It's like, essentially this would be perfectly fine for producing cocoa tea, this sort of a level. And our favorite way to do it is if you have a food processor or chopper, or you were a sucker about a Ninja chopper, this actually works really good. It's really fast, and it does a lot more at a time. So a kind of a chopper is good. What you shouldn't do is use your coffee mill, your burr grinder. And I'll put a picture here showing you what that looks like, because what happens is the heat and the rotation speed and stuff, it doesn't tend to pass through. It starts clogging and the oils start to secrete, and you get this paste, which is cool, except it's going to be very difficult to clean and recover your grinder and use it again for coffee. So don't use your burr grinder. Another thing I wanted to mention is I think a lot of people would want to use like an air roaster, a popper, or a popcorn popper or something. Well, cacao is incredibly heavy, and what will happen is that the fan on that will not turn this around and it will burn. It's actually pretty dangerous to try to roast with an air roaster. We haven't tried Gene Cafe, and we haven't tried the bullet, and I think the bullet might work really well. But you really want to bake this, and you're going for 20-minute, 23-minute roast times. So yeah, we're just going to have these limited sets for a time. Right now, it's the pairing of chocolate in coffees that have a lot of chocolate characteristics, along with actual cacao. And soon we're going to be doing an espresso set, and then we're going to be doing a Colombia coffee with Colombian cacao. And that'll be it. So in a few months, we'll have no more cacao. But I wanted to tell you that there's a fantastic place, especially if you're more interested in this, you want really high quality cacao, and you're interested perhaps in chocolate making, which I know nothing about. That is chocolatealchemy.com. That's actually a person who roasts coffee and noticed how great the Be More was for roasting cacao. His name's Alchemist John. He's the chocolate alchemist, and he has amazing resources, videos. He goes into details and really is, an expert on this. So we defer to him in all things cacao. But the main thing is this is just a fun thing to do, probably with equipment you already have. You may have a Be More, but everyone has a toaster oven. Everyone has, a regular oven. If you have a convection setting, that's better. And it's just really fun, and it's, I think, also great. Fills the home with a fantastic smell, and there's a lot you can do with it. So we hope you enjoy roasting cacao. Thanks.